Thank you, Eric. So today's conversation is all about the enterprise contact center. If you're joining us as an IT leader, I am going to be willing to bet you're probably dealing with some pains from the migraines and headaches that come along with managing contact center communications. Well, good news, if it's any solace, you're not alone. And in today's session, we're going to show you how Global 2000 enterprises are uniting their telephony, their call authentication platforms, and in their CCaaS platforms, all in the name of embracing the complexity that comes with migrating to the cloud. And as Eric just said, my name is Carly. As the Manager of Business Development at Bandwidth, I focus on leading our contact center strategy as it relates to great ecosystem partners like Pindrop.
Thank you, Carly. My name is Amit Gupta. I head the authentication business unit here at Pindrop. Pindrop started over a decade ago by enabling our customers to protect against fraud in contact centers. Over the last several years, we have evolved our technologies and products to provide capabilities to improve user experience via enhanced authentication leveraging multiple technologies, including voice biometrics, both within and beyond contact centers. I'm very, very excited today to join Carly and discuss the partnership with Bandwidth today that makes it extremely convenient and easy for our joint customers to not only leverage the robust and sturdy network from Bandwidth, but being able to secure their voice channels to reduce fraud exposure and improve experience for their users at the same time.
Lovely. So what we're going to go over today is from the perspective of Bandwidth as a global network. What does bring your own carrier mean in the contact center space, and why enterprises are requiring it from their partners, and why you should care about it? We're also going to talk about what it actually means when we talk about simplifying your cloud migration. And just because something is simple, that doesn't make it easy. Finally, we're going to talk about how to weave together some of the different apps, tools, and third-party platforms in your contact center environment, and why integrating tools like Pindrop into your contact center is so very important and exciting for the future of your operations as it relates to security and authentication.
All right, and with that, we have a poll that we'd like to invite y'all in the audience to help us by filling out. We're asking, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say cloud migration? Would you rather get a root canal? Ouch, painful, but worth it. You're just going to fake it till you make it, or you just help. I don't know what to do, but help, or all of the above. And we're going to give you a couple minutes to look it over. And while you're giving us your answers, Carly, one of the interesting things we learned at Enterprise Connect a couple weeks ago is that really still, especially the larger the enterprise, the vast majority of contact centers are either just beginning or haven't even begun their cloud migration yet. Is that something that you see from that perspective also?
Yeah, that's a great observation. We've watched over the past several years as small to medium-sized businesses have really led the charge into CCaaS adoption. Historically, some of the larger organizations, the Fortune 1000, the Global 2000, have been slow to make the move. But because of a variety of reasons that we'll talk about after this poll, we're now seeing that that's changing, and the cloud migration roadmap is becoming more unavoidable, no matter the size of the enterprise.
All right. Well, let's see what that poll told us. Looks like nearly half of the people recognize that it's not going to be easy, but ultimately it's going to be worth it. You add in all of the above, and you're over half of it. Good to see that a relatively small number are in the kind of completely lost category. I'll turn it back over to you, Carly, to make any comment, and Amit, any comments you want on this, and then move along with the presentation.
Well, having myself never received a root canal, I don't know if I can validate the results of that about 5%, but I know I speak for Amit and myself when I talk about that. We have both seen the direct impacts of this rapid growth, where businesses are able to enjoy the benefits of moving to the cloud. Now, that's scalability, global coverage, less infrastructure to manage, and lower costs. However, these roadblocks that come along the way cannot be avoided because they're slowing or altogether blocking the move to the cloud for a lot of these B2C companies. And what we're also seeing is that IT leaders are facing new challenges and pressures to become more flexible and elastic in a world that is so driven by customer experience. That's definitely a hot button word right now. And that trend of moving from on-prem to the cloud, it's moving up market, as you said. And so contact centers are moving to the cloud, but not without obstacles. Some of the ones you see on the screen are some that we're commonly hearing from our enterprise conversations. And so one thing I want to note is that traditionally, the carrier, in this case here at Bandwidth, has honestly been kind of absent from these conversations. We've been absent in the narrative about how you can go ahead with that cloud migration, and that's what we're aiming here to change. And so I'll introduce this concept of BYOC, bring your own carrier, and why you should care about it. So in pursuit of that simplicity, or at least taking away any extra complexities in the migration to the cloud, separating your PSTN access and your telephony from the CCaaS communications bundle, at first that might seem like it's an added complexity. But in fact, at Bandwidth, we've taken a different approach where we're really leaning into our strategic partnerships with these CCaaS platforms to facilitate BYOC, such as what we do with Genesis in our formal Duet partnership with them. And that allows us to deliver simplicity to the enterprises through a controlled migration of your telephony and your phone numbers and your porting with rollbacks as required and needed, flexibility over your integrations, a la Pindrop, and your migration to the actual software platform, direct-to-carrier troubleshooting and support, getting rid of that traditional swivel chair effect when something goes wrong, and of course, economic advantages of going directly to the carrier and, in many cases, your integration partner for those relationships. So, Eric, I'm actually going to jump ahead one more and ask you to go through this poll, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'm on it. So let's talk tech. What should an enterprise IT leader's first step be when planning a migration to the cloud? Phone a friend who just finished their migration? Should you just pick a contact center platform, plan your port, plan how it'll go, or pick a carrier? And maybe to, this obviously builds on this whole idea of bring your own carrier, but bring character too. And it's a really interesting thing to hear, Carly, hear you describe BYOC as a simplicity, as a move towards simplicity, because that's been BYOC has been such a hot topic, and it's been something that enterprises have been really interested in doing. On the CCaaS side, but also very much on the UCaaS side, and those who migrated Microsoft Teams during the pandemic, there was a lot of interest in the BYOC options there. And it's interesting to think about it that way, that it, in the midst of this migration to taking a lot of things out of your control as you move UC into the cloud, you at least, have that control of the telephony piece. It's a great point.
Mm-hmm. That's a good observation, Eric, and we can debate why until we're blue in the face, but the fact is the unified communications departments have honestly been a little more keen and faster to adopt that cloud migration. So what we're describing, a great comparison, is akin to direct routing with Microsoft Teams, where you're able to use that best-in-breed software platform that you want while still having the advantages of working directly with the carrier and maintaining a lot of that autonomy over your telephony stack.
And now if we just extend that to contact center and to whatever your specific issue as an enterprise may be around that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so let's see.
I'm really keen to see what people have to say.
Well, this looks like good news for Bandwidth. Picking a carrier is the first step that the plurality here see. So again, I'll turn it back over to you and Amit and let you talk it out and move on.
And Amit, I'd be curious if this surprises you based on your experience of watching and helping enterprises move to the cloud, if you're surprised by this answer or if this kind of checks out with the trends you're seeing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely surprising to see overwhelmingly people are saying they're going to pick a carrier first, because I was thoroughly expecting like 80% or so to plan the overall port, right? Because this typically what we are seeing with our customers is a very significant project, very important, which includes multiple teams, and getting a buy-in from all the stakeholders is very, very important. And typically there is a project management or program management team that creates entire program to make it happen. And sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years to get it done. So yes, it is definitely a surprise, but always willing to learn here.
Exactly. And I will say there's certainly no one right answer to this poll. It definitely was a bit of a leading question because all of these components, even phoning your friend who's been through this before, are very important parts of undertaking a huge project. But the trends, it sounds like both Pindrop and Bandwidth are seeing, is that when large enterprise contact centers, they know how to buy telecom, they know they'll save money, they want direct access to the network for support, they need more of what they're used to. And what we're finding is that when they do start with the carrier, beyond CCaaS, you can actually, that's when you really be able to begin to fully compose your contact center and make it custom and scalable. Quick anecdote about a mutual customer of Bandwidth and Pindrop's, a large Fortune 100 bank. And when we were first speaking to them on the Bandwidth side, they came to us and they said, yep, we've got our whole migration planned out. It's going to be 24 to 36 months. First, we picked our CCaaS platform. We know we've got to find a way to bring Pindrop into the equation to the cloud. And then maybe year 3, we'll look at the carrier. And I think that's really typical for how folks have been evaluating the cloud migration. And what we were able to do together at Pindrop and Bandwidth is and I think what we're challenging folks listening today here is to really flip that script and just see what's possible when you do bring things like the carrier and your third-party tools into the picture at the beginning rather than an afterthought. And so that's really the why behind BYOC, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper and talk about why Pindrop and Bandwidth specifically are helping to facilitate that and differentiate in the market. And if you're not familiar with Bandwidth's telecom network, quick high-level overview. And we mean it when we say our network is built differently. So what does that actually mean? Bandwidth is here to dispel the myth that you actually need relationships with multiple carriers out there in order to have the redundancy and resiliency that is required in order to be a functioning contact center when things go wrong, because we know they inevitably do go wrong. So with Bandwidth, you're not just relying on our feature group toll-free network, feature group D toll-free network rather, but you're also getting the power of 5 networks underneath that, because Bandwidth has architected our toll-free network to not only be connected to our own, but 5 other of the biggest toll-free providers in the country. And through those direct peering relationships, we have the ability to manage our customers' templates and toll-free traffic to send them through any one partner when anything goes wrong. And that's what you're seeing in the diagram when you see Bandwidth sitting atop those other carriers right there. And then, of course, no matter which toll-free network your customer's call is coming in from, it's all going to go back to Bandwidth's core network before passing on to the CCaaS platform and customer network as well. And that's where that 99.99%, 999, let's call it 5 nines, uptime comes from. And so in this, you're seeing examples of guaranteed redundancy and resiliency. Resiliency, we have those backup plans if something goes wrong. Redundancy, we have multiple routes in place to make sure that if something does go wrong, we're there as a backup. And then finally, I'll just state that the difference between Bandwidth's network is the fact that it was cloud natively built from the ground up, right? It's all IP, it's future ready, it hasn't existed on-prem. And so as we usher in our cloud-based future alongside some of the big internet giants out there, our core networks is housed in some of the most prestigious data centers here in the US, and it's held to the same standards as those internet and telecom giants alike. So all of our purpose-built networks, rather, CLEC, public safety, et cetera, are hosted in that core. So that's what your calls are moving through before they move on to your CCaaS platform and your own network.
Okay. So that brings us to our third poll of the day. What keeps you up at night? Is it concern about business continuity, fraud migration, disaster recovery, improving the customer experience? reducing or maintaining costs, or is it user authentication? And this is such an interesting list because, of course, the temptation is to say all of the above, but it's, improving CX has been such a kind of obsession, I think, since the pandemic. Just the way that accelerated the digital transformation, that so many enterprises have been focused on that. How do you, Carly and Amit, as you look at kind of these different competing, there's sort of the imperative to be secure and continuously available versus those kind of, I don't want to call them softer because they're business critical, but maybe harder to sort of quantify CX improvements.
Yeah,
and I think it speaks really well to Pindrop.
Yeah, absolutely, and you have hit it right, bang on here, right, Eric, that fraud mitigation, disaster recovery, business continuity, we hear improving CX, all of these from our customers pretty much on consistent basis. And honestly, the CX improvement, not just in pandemic, just a year or two before the pandemic started picking up a lot of steam, where most of our customers came to us looking for solutions to provide the best user experience, which as a consumer really delights me that organizations want to invest into improving the experience of their own customers, which is excellent. But during the pandemic, you're absolutely right. Most of our conversations start there. Even the fraud conversations are moving towards how they can be better in improving the experience for the genuine users first. And equally important is to identify and protect against fraud. But CX absolutely has become one of the most critical needs for organizations. We have done some research as well, and I think Forrester has done some research which shows that it only takes about 3 bad experiences for a consumer to change their service provider. And that just speaks to how important it is to improve the customer experience.
I think that's something that we all can relate to in 2 different ways as folks on this call. Is not only are we, among leaders in the IT space who are responsible for these decisions, we're all consumers as well. And I'm sure every one of us can think of a story where we were on the phone with, any kind of, B2C company or industry and had a frustrating experience as a consumer, right? So we're in a really unique position to see both sides of this. In addition, I think there's kind of been a misconception that one cannot achieve all of these things in the cloud migration. You're going to have to give something up, whether it's my costs so I can implement a great tool for fraud authentication, whether it's my customer experience because I'm making my end users answer a bunch of knowledge-based questions before they come in. And so we're here to dispel that myth today. And I did see in the chat, Eric, that someone said it only allowed us to select one. So just kind of knowing that going into the answers, I'm curious to see what folks selected as their top choice.
All right. Well, let's take a look at that. As we can see, it's business continuity and followed closely by disaster recovery. So clearly, I mean, the business criticality of the contact center still resonates, is above everything else, it seems like. But again, kind of turn it over to Amit and Carly to discuss and move on.
So, and again, understanding that it didn't actually, none of these things is unimportant, by being lower on the list. But again, going back to that idea, I think folks have that you can't have it all when you go to the contact center, because there's kind of this gap that exists when you go to the cloud from on-premise. And it's what Bandwidth and Pindrop have dubbed together as the integration gap. So this idea that on-prem, you've got autonomy and control over your call control, your voice metadata, et cetera. And when you migrate your servers over to a third party in the cloud, you lose the autonomy to manage calls and bring in third-party tools as you wanted to. So how do you keep all these things together? How do you ensure through a great network carrier that you have disaster recovery and business continuity at your fingertips? How do you ensure that you're implementing tools that allow for voice authentication but are helping to keep your costs low and keeping your customer experience high? right? There's never been an easy button before, but that's what Bandwidth and Pindrop have built together, is that easy button. And our solution is the carrier should be the one who is responsible for being that glue. So when you start with the carrier, you can actually compose the contact center how you want to, not how you think you have to do it. And that means you have the flexibility to weave in these third-party solutions like Pindrop to your call flow and complete your move to the cloud. So you don't have to leave that clunky SBC equipment on the edge of your network in order to direct call flows and media. Your carrier, Bandwidth, is the one that does that for you. So here, just calling back to the network slide from a couple minutes ago, here's how that works with Pindrop and insert your CCaaS platform of choice. Our integration with the folks at Pindrop is a carrier, a network level bridge between Pindrop, your CCaaS platform, and your inbound voice for real-time media. So those two arrows that are reflected to the left of our core network, that's a mechanism of media forking that we've built together via SIPREC to get your calls simultaneously into Pindrop and your CCaaS platform before going on to your agents. And this means improved rates of caller authentication, fraud mitigation, agent and customer experiences. You know, let's not forget how difficult a bad customer experience can be on the agent as well, and no overhead for call capture for your customers, which all means a more efficient contact center. And we talk about simplicity, right? And so this integration that we have built is out of the box, which means customers don't necessarily have to lift a finger to ensure that the call capture, call data, call control they need is getting where it needs to go. And what makes this integration unique in the market is that it allows enterprises to work directly with both their carrier Bandwidth and Pindrop, that best-in-breed third-party voice authentication tool, rather than having to go through a bunch of different avenues. And that's why BYOC really matters at the end of the day, is the ability to kind of pick and choose and not be held to that once you do continue to scale. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. And so, Amit, we talked a lot about, how Bandwidth facilitates this. But it's so important to understand, that this partnership sounds cliche, but a classic example of 1 + 1 = more than 2. And I'd love to understand that a little more from Pindrop's side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, that's spot on. And you have raised some very important and great points already, that one of the things that we are able to help our customers with is to start analyzing the call from start to the beginning and leverage every part of that call to provide the value that they're looking to get. And this integration with Bandwidth, which I'm super excited about, makes it extremely simple, super easy for our mutual customers to get that call, a copy of the call, over to Pindrop at the same time when that live call is going to their contact center. And that allows them to get the real-time intel back to them where they can use that in real time to make decisions. And typically the decisions that our customers like to make can result in reduction in phone fraud. And that's because when we are analyzing the calls and we are assessing every attribute of the audio from the call, every attribute of the voice or the speech on the call, as well as the metadata. And again, with this integration, one of the things that I'm looking forward to is the rich metadata that Bandwidth can provide directly to Pindrop, which we can leverage not just to make it super easy to identify the same call that's going into the contact center, but also enrich our risk engines, enrich our authentication engines to do the analysis and provide that intel much, much faster to again, our mutual customers. And they can route the high-risk calls to specialized agents. They can get the alerts on the fraud for post-call mitigation. And what we are able to do is, for most of our customers, we are able to detect over 80% of the total fraud that comes from the contact center agent. Traditionally, the customers have invested very heavily in fortifying their digital channels, their web channel, their mobile app, their firewalls on the IP network. However, the telephony network has traditionally relied on SIP, which is, of course, lagging in terms of the advancements that the IP networking has seen, but we are able to leverage every aspect of that call, every aspect of the audio to identify greater than 80% of the total fraud even there and close that gap on the weakest link. We also have observed that more than 60% of the total fraud that happens touches the phone channel in one way or the other. So by assessing all the calls that are coming for a certain account on that phone channel, we are able to leverage the intel to identify when the fraudsters are just doing reconnaissance or they are in the very first few steps of perpetrating fraud. Even if the actual fraud is perpetrated in a different channel, they're doing all that reconnaissance on the phone channel in the IVR itself, and we are able to detect that to provide that proactive notification of a certain account that is at a higher risk or that is under attack right now. So very excited about some of those advancements that we have recently made on the fraud side as well. As I was saying earlier, the discussions we are having with our customers they have drastically pivoted towards improving the customer experience. And what we are able to do is we are able to provide our customers ability to reduce the friction on almost 95% of all calls that come into the contact center. For several of them, we are able to enable, our customers are able to eliminate friction altogether, but at least reducing the friction is possible on day one itself so that they can expedite the service for good callers. The reality is less than 1% of all your callers are actually the malicious attackers or the nefarious users. Most of them are genuine users, and still most of the organizations are still making them go through the same digital frisk as every other user. And that's what we enable them to do, to identify who's a good user so that they can expedite the service. They can enable enhanced self-service options within IVR. So some of the newer generations, they just like to be self-served, but to be able to do that within IVR, organizations need to get that high level of confidence that it is the right user, it is the user who they are claiming to be. And again, leveraging the multi-factor authentication platform, which is not just voice, not just device, but a combination where we are assessing every attribute of the call. We allow them to enable that enhanced self-service options in the IVR as well. And overall, our customers have mentioned that they have seen the NPS improvements in the post-call survey as much as 5%, pretty much right away within a month of implementing the enhanced authentication. Not just that, they have seen improvements in the productivity of the agents as well, because the reduction of friction also comes with AHT reduction. And that's where they are able to now enhance the performance for the IVR and agent as well, because on an average, they're able to reduce 30 to 60 seconds on every call that is getting authenticated through Pindrop platform. And when you combine that against millions of calls that our customers are processing every year, that results in some significant savings. One of the customers shared that they saw their agent productivity was increased by 14% just by implementing the enhanced authentication, just by reducing that amount of time that they had to spend on authentication. And not just that, they actually saw that the agents became happier as well. It's not just their end customers who were giving the feedback that they are liking the new way of authentication. Their agents also told them that they never liked to ask those KBA-related questions. Because first of all, it's friction laden, right? It's adding the friction. How can answering where I live, what my zip code helps me transferring money to a friend, right? It's just friction that organizations are forced to add in to just provide additional security or get that sense of security. And on top of it, it's known that KBAs can be bypassed by fraudsters 40 to 60% of the times. So by eliminating the KBAs, we are making their agents more performant as well as within the IVR, we are seeing that just by adding the enhanced authentication and not making any other IVR improvements, our customers are seeing the IVR containment to be up by almost 5% on annual basis. And this goes up even higher in certain verticals like insurance, where the customers have reported improvements of as much as even 10% on annual basis, which is great and which can be understood because the entire platform does the enrollment and authentication completely passively. There is never a recommendation to add more friction, which is different from some of the other tools out there that are in the market, where if they're only based on voice, then the call flow itself is changed, where you are trying to seek additional voice, But voice is just one of the factors in our platform. And because we can do the device authentication, behavior authentication, leveraging the great metadata that Bandwidth can provide us, we can do any validation, which when you combine that by any match on file, you can have very high confidence on those callers as well. And on top of it, we have a built-in fraud risk assessment. Pindrop has one of the largest fraud consortiums of almost greater than 2.5 million confirmed fraud calls, and we have analyzed over 5 billion calls. So leveraging that rich metadata and machine learning, we have created several risk engines that allow our customers to protect the brand and reputation by not getting the target, not becoming the target of motivated fraudsters. But on top of it, also it enhances their brand reputation because it improves the CSAT scores. It gives a perception of an organization that's willing to make investments to improve the end user's experience, who's investing into their customer success. So there's some great feedback that we hear from our customers, and these are typically the value drivers that our customers come to us for. One thing I mentioned earlier, which is extremely exciting with this integration, is we take pride in the fact that we are able to assess the call during the entire life cycle. So before the call gets into the IVR, as well as when it goes to the agent, the customers can call the exact same APIs to know the authentication decisions, to know the risk decisions at any point in the call. What this integration allows us to do is get this visibility much before the call even lands in the IVR. So within the Bandwidth network, we'll be able to identify if the caller ID that is being presented is spoofed or not. If based on that caller ID, based on the time of the call, based on the other metadata that we can assess in the SIP headers, what is the reputation of that caller ID? Is the fraud risk high, or is it low enough that we want to continue to process that call? We are going to be able to do that right in Bandwidth's network before the call gets into IVR. Once the call is in the IVR and the user is either pressing the keys because you have a DTMF IVR, or they're speaking because you have a natural language enabled IVR, or you have a natural language enabled that accepts DTMF, and the user different users are in different scenarios. One is working in a public elevator, the other one is sitting in the security of their house. They may have different preferences in terms of whether they want to speak or whether they want to key in their inputs. But whatever data we are able to collect on the audio, on these key presses, on the voice, we start assessing that in the IVR itself and start providing that higher level of confidence. So the users are pre-authenticated, and agents, if that call lands into the agent, they don't have to spend any more time authenticating the user, so they can save that 30 to 60 seconds. And with this high level of multi-factor authentication confidence, the customers can start processing more and more services within the IVR and contain more calls within the IVR, completely eliminating the cost of handling a call at the agent leg, but also improving the user experience. And they can do that while continuing to consume the layered security approach, because the same technologies that we are leveraging to identify the good callers and confirm that this is the caller who they say they are, we are leveraging the same technologies tuned in a different way to identify very precisely that top 0.1% of the risky callers that are most likely fraudulent. And we are able to do that for a lot of our customers with extremely low false positive rates, where most of the alerts that we present, or the review rates where they are reviewing the alerts versus what they're confirming back as fraud, is 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 in many of the cases. So it's really, really exciting what the technology is able to do. And on top of the contact center, we are also now bringing the same voice technology beyond the contact center, where as the contact centers start leveraging conversational AIs or the omni-channel user experience, we are right there with the voice security. The sole mission for Pindrop is to provide the identity, trust, and intelligence on every voice interaction, irrespective of the voice channel that it happens on. Obviously, contact center is the first one and is the most prominent one right now. But with the advent of smart devices, we will certainly see the evolution of how businesses allow their users to start interacting with them as well. And we are ahead of that game just to make sure that we can help our customers there as well. So again, very excited about this partnership, very excited about helping the mutual customers get that high level of confidence to improve the user experience while continuing to improve their security posture, continuing to keep the bad callers out of their contact center.
It's so really incredible to see.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Amit. I was just going to say it's really incredible to see how, without Pindrop, Bandwidth has enterprise contact center customers coming to us and saying, hey, I'm really concerned about authentication. I'm a hotel or a retail industry concerned about making sure my users are who they say they are. I'm really concerned as an insurance company about making sure the person filing this claim is who they say they are. And without Pindrop, Bandwidth would not have an easy way to say to them, hey, you can go do that. It's somewhat, there's a lot out there, best of luck. But what we've done is we've built something that makes it easy. And conversely, the way Pindrop kind of builds upon the network and carrier data that is available wouldn't be able to function as efficiently without what is provided by Bandwidth. And so truly that's what I mean, where 1 + 1 = 3 here for our enterprise customers, where they are getting something better by working with both than they could by anywhere else individually.
I completely agree. And then that's why this integration in my mind is definitely bringing the best of two worlds together so that the customer gets amplified value from both of us.
Certainly.
So I think that's pretty much the end of the presentation, and we are ready to take on questions.
All right. Well, thanks very much. A terrific presentation, really lots of great information and lots of great insights shared by our audience. So thanks to the audience for participating in those polls. And now we encourage you to continue participating by sending in your questions for Q&A, and we'll read those out. Please do let us know what you're thinking and where you'd like to take the conversation. For starters, I guess maybe to the point that I brought up earlier in the call, talking about the sort of gradual pace of the migration to the cloud and the enterprise's need to kind of deal with all the complexity that exists within their premises contact center that they may have had for years and years. So what if I'm not ready to migrate to the cloud, or it is a longer process, but this idea of voice authentication really seems to like it's an important part of my fraud mitigation strategy. How might I be able to address that?
Mm-hmm.
I can take the first stab here, but Carly definitely add that. So if you're not ready to migrate to cloud yet, that's absolutely okay, because again, with the integration between Bandwidth and Pindrop, we are getting the copy of the call right from the carrier itself. So there is no data that we will require your on-prem IVR or the contact center to send to us. And the entire solution actually provides the intel in real time to our customers through REST APIs. So as long as your on-prem IVR and on-prem agent desktop can start calling the REST APIs, that's all you need when you use Bandwidth for your carrier, because we are getting the call data directly from the carrier here.
So
I was going to say that's really the beauty of it, is that you can begin at your own pace. And when you are ready to make that migration, because when we talk about a cloud migration, we're actually talking about two massive projects: the movement of your telephony and the movement of your software and your agents platform, right? And so what this relationship really allows folks to do is separate those two things. And so if they are set up with Pindrop and Bandwidth on premise, as you just described, when you are ready to make that ultimate migration to the cloud, Bandwidth can help you by moving your numbers over to Bandwidth and your telephony over to us. Pindrop stays where it is. And when you are ultimately ready to do that migration of the software, well, it's as easy as Bandwidth just bringing them into the call flow. And because Bandwidth powers 11 of the 12 contact centers in the CCaaS Gartner Magic Quadrant, it's incredibly simple no matter which player you choose to work with.
And kind of looking at it kind of on the other side, and a trend that we saw during the pandemic was really large-scale movement of agents to home work. Is it any different, or is there anything about the process or the flows that are different if I have a significant number of agents that I want to support that are working remotely?
Yeah, and Eric, that's a great observation and a great question as well, because what we saw in pandemic is that it actually expedited the move to get to the conversational AI, to get to CCaaS platforms, to get to enhanced authentication. Customers were already looking at it with the advent of conversational AI in terms of how to leverage voice biometrics for authentication, how to improve and streamline the authentication experience. They were already looking to make sure that their investment in security remains at par for the contact centers as well as they have done over the last few years on the digital channels. But when pandemic occurred, the companies weren't ready. I mean, all these agents started working from home, the call volumes increased, and Pindrop even published a report after the first year in the pandemic. The call volumes increased, and it put the contact centers under tremendous pressure. And under that pressure, fortunately, most of the companies looked at technology and started finding answers with the technology. And that's where the movement to cloud, leveraging the carrier robustness and sturdiness like Bandwidth, leveraging the enhanced authentication and fraud mitigation from Pindrop, leveraging the ability to be more efficient with handling those calls, increasing the IVR containment, deflecting the calls with high confidence to other channels became extremely, extremely important. And those were the steps that our customers took to actually leverage our technologies even more to solve for the problem where the agents were certainly under tremendous pressure. And many of those companies are not back to office completely still. So that pressure hasn't been completely relieved. And the call volumes aren't going down significantly. That increased call volume, the surge, the initial panic that came in with the pandemic, that definitely subsided. But what we are seeing is still the increased amount of call volume that we still process for our customers, and that's sustaining. So with that, this is extremely important for the customers to start looking at ways in terms of getting to that high confidence on a call as quickly as possible, leveraging the latest in the technologies out there.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up such a good point about the fact that every enterprise handled the move to home from COVID differently. They handled the move back differently. Not only that, all of their initial setups are completely, different. You might have individual offices across the country who have entirely different setups on-prem. So how do you find an easy button when there are so many factors? And I just want to call it back to one of those polls about, what are you most concerned about? What keeps you up at night? That's what has allowed us to create this easy button, is by looking at the themes that unite contact centers, which is, how do I keep my agents, safe and happy? How do I maintain, that quality customer experience when we're all being forced to go home and my agents are being forced to use their cell phones if we haven't had a plan in place? And how do I ensure I'm future-proofing what I'm building and making sure disaster recovery and business continuity are built into whichever way I go? Those are the things that have, despite it looking different for everyone, we've seen have really united all the contact centers in how we've all been affected by COVID and this acceleration to the cloud.
Okay, makes sense. We've got a few questions now coming in from the audience. This person's asking just simply, have you successfully helped an organization migrate to the cloud with this integration? And I'd add, if you have, I suspect maybe you have, is there any sort of color or any anecdotal advice or thoughts that some specific cases might give us?
Amit, I might briefly tell our Pindrop Bandwidth origin story, as I like to call it, our superhero origin story. So I might provide some color around that, and I'd love for you to add to it as well. So
sure.
Here's a nice callback. Flashback 4 years ago at Enterprise Connect, actually, when Bandwidth was approached by a large Fortune 100 bank who was a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of the acceleration to the cloud, but they had run into a roadblock in which they got to a certain point with the CCaaS provider they had elected. They were trying to bring Pindrop, around whom they had built their entire voice authentication and fraud mitigation strategy, and they realized there was no way to bring Pindrop into the cloud with them without maintaining SBCs on the edge of their network to help with that call control. And so they met Bandwidth at Enterprise Connect and said, "Hi, Bandwidth, here's Pindrop, make this work." And that is a story that I like to tell because it just demonstrates that this integration is not something that was built out of, good faith that it would do well in the market. It has been consistently asked for again and again by customers of all sizes across multiple industries. So at that point, Bandwidth and Pindrop said, we need to go and see if this is replicable, and it is. And we're actively doing this for businesses of all sizes to the point where, we have sales teams and experts even advising on, RFPs that enterprises should be things that they should be concerned about when they're writing those out, right? Things that enterprises just wouldn't know without this integration in place. So that's just one example of how Bandwidth is helping folks migrate to the cloud. And Amit, I'm sure you have more color around that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you touched on this. So financial institutions were where it all started. However, we are seeing this now with the cloud migration and the pace that this cloud migration has picked up across different verticals, where the CCaaS platforms that are powered from the carrier being Bandwidth behind the scenes is really where we are able to provide this value very, very quickly, even if it's a net new customer or if it's an existing customer. And because the answer was very specifically talking about the successful migration, I would also want to touch that one of the things that Pindrop takes pride in is our customer focus and being completely customer oriented and providing the best experience to our customers. And what we saw was that is a value that's absolutely shared with by Bandwidth as well. So when one of our customers was changing their carriers with their cloud migration, they were moving to Bandwidth. One of the concerns they had was the anti-validation performance that they were getting with the previous carrier. What will be the change there? Will it be changed? Will there be a significant impact? And Pindrop and Bandwidth worked together to not just simulate what the impact would be, but we were so precise in terms of telling them that and setting the right expectations there, that when the actual move happened, it became extremely seamless, no issues identified, and the customer still is extremely, extremely happy. So absolutely, we have done a couple of these migrations already. As Carly said, we are actually in the process of doing a lot more. Pindrop brings Bandwidth as an option for bring your own carrier to our mutual customers and to our customers as well who are looking to migrate to cloud. And Bandwidth is bringing in Pindrop as the voice authentication partner. So it's just going to be a lot more prevalent in near future as well.
Cool. I wonder if you've had any experiences with customers where, I think about some of the things that you've talked about here in this hour in terms of bring your own carrier has been an approach that a lot of enterprises have hoped and in a lot of cases succeeded in using as a way to save money versus other approaches to the voice network access. And then, Amit, you discussed a few of the ways that Pindrop, helps reduce average hold time and some of the other contact center metrics that can be tied directly to ROI. So is kind of, whether you've had maybe the experience or not, could an enterprise look at this as, these two elements and maybe others can help me sort of build the ROI case for making that transition to the cloud, or for if it is more expensive to use a CCaaS service, that's offset by some of the savings that we're talking about here.
Yeah, so absolutely. In fact, every conversation that we have with the customer starts with creating a business case for them so that they can justify the investment to the businesses and get those approvals, right? And some of the things that just by leveraging the enhanced authentication and fraud protection that customers can expect, certainly are the reduction in fraud losses. And many of our customers, and they have been of all sizes, but we are in 8 of top 10 banks, for example, top 5 of 7 insurances, the top brokerages, top healthcare providers. They are all leveraging the services for one reason or the other. And what they give us as feedback is that typically within the first 6 months, the investment that they have made already gave them almost 2x the returns back. In fact, recently, Forrester had published one of the total economic impact report by talking to 6 of our customers and bringing all of that together. That certainly can be downloaded from the Pindrop's website as well, which shows that on an average, 170% return is what customers are able to get within the first 6 months. And certainly when you talk about bring your own carrier, it's more than just the cost efficiency. Cost efficiency is absolutely part of it, but it's the ease, it's the removal of that overhead of managing your own infrastructure. And I'm pretty sure, Carly, you can talk to more about that. But it goes much beyond just the immediate cost savings. It's the constant and future savings and the seamless transition that they can actually have, and the high quality, the scalability they can get, that gets even more interesting for customers.
Mm-hmm. So beautifully said, Amit. It's the ROI and the cost savings seem to be kind of a gateway reason to bring up the cloud migration. But when you realize the things that are possible based on beginning the conversation with the carrier and your third-party tools, that's the feedback that we've been seeing of, oh, okay, I really can have all these things that are important to me through this cloud migration. And some of the other feedback we've seen from customers is that those cost savings of working directly with the carrier and through, first call resolution and hold time reduction, et cetera, have allowed them to reinvest that money back into their agents and back into the software platforms, these CCaaS platforms that they're using to provide richer and better experience for both the agents and the customers.